Today, we're delving into cybersecurity, a very vital area as online threats increase and cybercrime impacts consumers and businesses alike.
We saw that there's a large concern by consumers around financial institutions. 78% were concerned about their online banking. 76% were concerned about the banks actually being breached or having their data breached.
Listeners, protecting your business means understanding the risks. As Kevin mentioned, awareness is a first step in building a safer digital environment.
But in terms of types of attacks, again, similar to most other organizations, phishing is a very common one, whether it be via email, via voicemail, so it's called vishing, and then via text messaging, smishing, where you get a text saying, hey, approve this a bank payment, and it may or may not come from your bank.
To our listeners, cybersecurity is not just a tech issue, it's a business priority. Taking proactive measures today can save significant costs and risks in the future. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the CanadianSME Small Business Podcast, where we explore topics that are crucial to small businesses across Canada. And today, we're delving into cybersecurity, a very vital area as online threats increase and cybercrime impacts consumers and businesses alike. Joining us is Kevin Dawson, the president and CEO of ISA Cybersecurity. Kevin is a respected voice in cybersecurity with 30 years of experience helping organizations defend against evolving cyber threats. His insights span from advisory roles to hands-on cybersecurity leadership across Canada. Kevin, we're very pleased to have you on the podcast. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you very much.
Kevin, we are very excited to gain your insights on how small businesses can strengthen their cybersecurity in today's digital world. Now, to kick things off, with digital transactions on rise, Canadians are increasingly concerned about online banking security, and surveys do help shed light on these very important worries. So let's begin by, kind of delving into a bit more about this. What are the most compelling results from your national survey on Canadian cyber concerns? And were there any findings that surprised you particularly?
Absolutely. So the survey was predominantly around financial institutions. And we saw that there's a large concern by consumers around financial institutions. 78% were concerned about their online banking. 76% were concerned about the banks actually being breached or having their data breached, and so those were highlighted in the survey. An additional interesting point was that 60+% are willing to adopt additional controls, like
Right.
they'd be willing to do things above and beyond what they're doing today, like multi-factor authentication, to enhance their own security. Which was interesting. It shows kind of the heightened increase or heightened awareness that people have around cybersecurity and what goes on. But I think what was most interesting in the survey results was the large number, over 50% of people who don't hear from their banks about the cybersecurity efforts they're making.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very surprising. We deal with the banks. We're their customers of ours, and we know the investments they're making and the efforts they're doing and the work that they do to keep Canadians and Canadian consumers secure. But the interesting part there is that they seem to be a gap in how they're communicating that to their consumers or to their customers.
Right.
And I think there's a great opportunity out of this survey for the banks to effectively recommunicate the efforts they're making and the things that they're doing to build trust and keep consumers secure in their online banking.
Well, that's amazing. And it's really fascinating how some insights really differ from expectations. So thank you so much for sharing those highlights, Kevin. But what measures do you feel are essential for institutions to rebuild trust among their consumers in today's digital landscape?
Well, I think there's a multifaceted approach that needs to be taken there. The banks need to effectively communicate what they're doing and build out trust about the investments they're making. At the same time, and so interaction with the consumers is important. At the same time, the collaboration between government and institutions and government and businesses is starting to come up as a rise, and it's becoming very prevalent in the industry. And helping create confidence. Ultimately, you need to build trust in your consumers, and they need to be trusting in the supply that you're providing, whether that be banks, whether it be any institution in that matter. And so those things are critical to building trust, and then communicate and over communicate, whether that be with your employees, with potential consumers, what you're doing to help protect them. It helps build trust when you know what they're already doing and not being in the shadows of what's being done. There's a fine line. You can't give all the details of what you're doing because that educates potential threat actors, but at least telling them that you're making significant investments and that you're working to protect them.
Right. Talking about the rise, I'd love to highlight one of the interesting facts. In 2024 alone, 67 of Canadian businesses, they reported cyber threats as a primary risk factor, with small businesses seeing a 34% increase in cybersecurity investments. And it's great how you've, really highlighted this key factor into it, that it's really enlightening to see the importance of data in addressing consumer concerns. Listeners, protecting your business means understanding the risks. As Kevin mentioned, awareness is a first step in building a safer digital environment. And that leads us to our next topic, where we'd love to discuss the specific threats that financial institutions face and what they mean for consumers. So on that note, Kevin, as online banking expands, financial institutions, they face numerous cybersecurity challenges. Knowing these threats is essential for proactive defense. So could you please walk us through some of the most common cyber attacks on financial institutions, and who are the primary attackers and who's most vulnerable?
Yeah, that's a great question. The banks are interesting in the fact that the threat vectors are not just the institutions, but all the consumers.
Right.
We all have apps, and I would say that they're not necessarily unique in the attacks that are done against them. Obviously, the volume and the size of their environment is much larger than most organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So in that regard, there tends to be an increased scrutiny around financial institutions. But in terms of types of attacks, again, similar to most other organizations, phishing is a very, very common one, whether it be via email, via voicemail, so it's called vishing, and then via text messaging, smishing, where you get a text saying, hey, approve this a bank payment, and it may or may not come from your bank. Email's the other one. And these tend to be precursors to leading to other types of attacks, like account compromise, business email account compromise, individual account compromise, which the threat actors there are using those accounts to, in the furtherance of their attack.
Mm-hmm.
I now have someone's legitimate account. People tend to be on the lookout for suspicious emails, but if you get an email from a legitimate account of your colleague, you're going to be less likely to be suspicious of it.
Right.
And you might do it because, okay, well, I've done all the checks. I've checked the email name. It's the right name. It's from our organization. It doesn't say external at the beginning of the subject line. So this must be legitimate. And so your guards go down when there's a business email compromise and someone's email gets compromised. And that's where the potential threat actors get additional information, and they can get things like payments redirected and those sorts of things that are impactful to organizations. And then oftentimes in the large institutions, there is a concern about insider threat.
Mm-hmm.
Threat actors either leveraging vulnerable people inside an organization who might have access to information and promising more than they're getting paid today.
Right.
Or even just internal threats of people who are disgruntled or upset and looking to take it out on the organization they work on. And so all these things, and they expand not just to the employees of the bank, these threats, but in consumers.
Mm-hmm.
I can get an email saying, hey, you need to approve this bank payment for my personal account. And it could come as a phishing type email. So the threat vector, or the landscape of what is potential out there for the banks is massive. They have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of clients that are all using, as you indicated, their online presence and their online apps and the tools that the banks should make available to them to make it more convenient for them to work with them, but at the same time opens up another exposure point.
Of course. No, it's really eye-opening to also see how these threats continue to evolve, and the risk seems widespread yet very targeted. But Kevin, are there certain institutions or consumer types that are more vulnerable to these attacks than other people?
Well, and it goes to your part of your previous question in terms of who's instituting these,
Mhm.
and a lot of these are done by nation state actors, cyber criminal organizations that exist in countries where the cyber laws are either very lax or non-existent, or even the efforts that these criminals are making are endorsed by the government or indoor countries themselves.
Right.
And so they tend to be looking at, in terms of the vulnerable population or the vulnerable, they tend to be looking at large organizations with larger attack surfaces. Obviously, companies that don't do kind of the minimum requirements to keep themselves secure, don't have certain controls, they're obviously the most vulnerable
Mhm.
because their controls are lax. But again, as you get bigger into the larger organizations, critical infrastructure, the Canadian government is doing things to help solidify critical infrastructure and what we deem as services and businesses necessary to Canada. So think of the healthcare industry, think of the banks, think of the energy, the
Mhm.
telecommunications industries. All of these are critical to our everyday lives. We can't live
Right.
without them. And so the governments are making sure that those institutions are exceeding the minimum bar in terms of cybersecurity capacity and cybersecurity prevalence, and so they tend to be high attack vectors. It's politically motivated. If our banks in Canada were disrupted, the impact to the Canadian economy, the impact to Canadian confidence could be shattered. So the threat actors are going after those large ones to oftentimes to impact the Canadian economy, the Canadian people, confidence in the Canadian institutions, whether that be, again, the financials, which were the result of this survey, but it could be the telecommunications, it could be the energy sector, could be healthcare. We saw healthcare a couple of years ago
Right.
getting attacked often, and they're also because of the information they have, because of the sector they're in,
Mhm.
um, because of oftentimes their size and the impact of the Canadian economy. They're often the ones that really need to make sure the data isn't either leaked, divulged. So the criminal actors believe that if they compromise that information, whether it be valuable information that others would like to know, or whether it be valuable information that exposes that company or exposes something else about the industry, those threat actors feel that those industries are more likely to pay the ransom and to react and meet their demands.
Well, thank you for being very detailed and thorough. And I mean, understanding these threats, they better they equips us to combat them properly as well. To our listeners, cybersecurity is not just a tech issue; it's a business priority. Taking proactive measures today can save significant cost and risk in the future. And up next, Kevin, we'll look into the best practices for organizations to really strengthen their defenses. Because building a robust, cybersecurity posture, it's key for any organization, especially as threats multiply, as you highlighted those. What are the top three actions that a business should take to improve its cybersecurity defenses?
Yeah, so for a lot of, I'll talk a bit for a lot of the more mid market and small better businesses in Canada.
Mhm.
They really should kind of meet the minimum requirements, and that could be following a cybersecurity framework and getting a assessment done against their controls against that framework. Cyber criminals today are leveraging AI technologies. And therefore, to kind of deflect those or beat those, you're going to have to start to enable AI technologies in your own environment,
Right.
in terms of whether that be AI powered tools, whether that be creating your own agents to help react or help defend your environment.
Hmm.
At ISA Cybersecurity and with our partners like IBM, Security Canada, we've created tools and we've created processes that are AI driven that help faster detect, faster respond, faster remediate these things, taking a bit of the human equation out of them, supporting the people that we have in our staff today to do this. This is what we do all day long. This is our business. So I think organizations, where they can, need to also adapt those tools. Another methodology to adapt is the notion of zero trust.
Hmm.
This is where I kind of trust but validate on everything. So if a person doesn't have access, they shouldn't have access to certain applications, things. And then I would say, and it's widely undervalued or underappreciated is the power of training your people,
Mm-hmm.
both your clients and your employees. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, in today, still our employees and the people out there are our first line of defense.
True.
It's oftentimes them that are being attacked in a way, whether it be through those methods I talked about before. And so, if you get a greater cybersecurity awareness and culture in your organization, you train those people and you regularly test them, um, that has a massive impact for organizations' resilience around cyber.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing I'd say is all your controls, whatever you put in place, following a framework, you've done an assessment to say, hey, I'm missing these things. The last piece I'd say is practice and
Right.
test. You don't become a professional in almost anything. Think of sports without practicing and without being tested against what you know and what you do and what you built.
Mm-hmm.
And the test will kind of find gaps in what what you thought you would, how you thought you might respond to a specific incident.
Right.
So those are certain areas that I would say would be key.
No, those steps, they sound powerful, yet very practical, and it's clear that a proactive approach is indeed needed. But Kevin, what advice would you give to companies that are balancing cost concerns with effective cybersecurity measures?
Yeah, it is a challenge, and there is what I'll call an entry point to cybersecurity. The banks and the financial institutions have hundred millions and hundreds of $1 million budgets around some of these things,
Mm-hmm.
and that doesn't scale down to the smallest of smallest organizations. So I would say start with being kind of proactive.
Right.
Start with doing an assessment against where you are related to either a framework, best practices in the industry, an assessment against where you are against your peers, other organizations of your size, and have that assessment looking at the controls you have in place, the ones you don't, and the ones you do have in place. How effective are they?
Mm-hmm.
We've seen in the industry, we've seen time and time again, people invest a lot in controls, a lot in tools where there's either still gaps or there's overlap.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's overlap, then you're effectively not spending efficiently. And that's where organizations get into trouble, where they spend more than they could because they have overlaps in technologies. So there is a good approach in a lot of small businesses to look at a platform, a
Mm-hmm.
consolidated platform where you have one spending point. A lot of organizations leverage companies like us to
Right.
effectively be their 724 eyes on glass and be their security operations center and be their lookout for it. It's all we do, and it's not necessarily all that those small businesses do. So to have staff watching 724, some of those organizations don't have enough people in their
That is
organizations to be
true.
able to do that. So prioritizing, matching against kind of an assessment against where you are today, and then over time building into your plan, future roadmap, a budget to attack the items that are gaps that are deemed most critical to protecting your organization. And one way to do that is to look at what is the piece of your technology in your organization, or what is it in your company that is what we call a crown jewel. What
Mm-hmm.
is the most valuable thing that, if lost, we see time and time again when we're involved in ransom type situations
Right.
where the client has data that was ransomed, and when they look into what it was, they're like, well, this is inert data. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm not going to pay because I don't need that back.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, oh, this is employee social insurance information. This is customer details. This is credit card information. This is very confidential or privacy pivoted information. Then the concern gets heightened. But really, if you organize your security controls around things that don't necessarily need those controls, you're again spending money where you don't need it. So focus on those crown jewels. Focus on protecting the things that's most vulnerable, that's most critical to your organization. And the only way you can do that is by doing an assessment and looking at what those things are you have in place today and where your gaps are.
No, thank you so much for sharing those valuable insights on strengthening cybersecurity while balancing cost effectiveness. Now, cybersecurity is evolving, and so should your approach. Continuous learning and adaptability can make all the difference. Kevin, let's discuss the overcoming obstacles like cost and complexity in cybersecurity implementation. Because for many organizations, cost and complexities are significant barriers to effective cybersecurity, and solutions often seem overwhelming. How can organizations really tackle these obstacles to build a strong cyber defense?
Well, and it kind of goes back on the previous question we talked about. I mean, the first thing, and it's not that overwhelming for most organizations, is do an assessment against where you are today. If you don't have an idea of where you are, and again, as I said, that can be an evaluation against a framework that has been created for the purpose of cybersecurity evaluation. Things like the NIST framework, things like ISO 27001. The U.S. has a framework for dealing with the Department of Defense called CMMC. So you can assess against those, depending on who your clientele is and what industry you're in. So assessing against those frameworks. You can also assess against kind of best practices, which those frameworks all represent.
Right.
That's what they're built around. And then you can assess against your peers and others in your organization and where you're at. And again, some things scale down fairly well. There's certain things you can do in your organization as controls that scale from top to bottom. And then there are other things that you're going to have to kind of make time and make budget for. And it's an interesting point, because one of the things that we've seen in organizations is, in addition to what we talked about in the survey about companies not educating their consumers around what they're investing in cybersecurity, we also see a lot in businesses of all sizes where they're not doing the greatest job of building the use case and the business case internally to put forward to have the funding given to them or available to them for budget to invest in cybersecurity. So it's education all the way around. It's not just clients, it's not just your employees, but it's also upstream education as well to show the significance and importance. And taking something like an assessment up the food chain of the organization and saying, here's the gaps we have in our organization. Here's the critical assets we have that may or may not be protected effectively. And the impact of a breach against those assets would look like this. Now, oftentimes, and unfortunately, we get brought in oftentimes to new customers during an event, during a breach. And it's not the best time to be kind of tackling these things. So our goal, first and foremost, is to help the customer remediate from that incident, recover, and get operational again. But out of that, the next step is really to look at what control gaps they have and how can we help that customer build up fences and help justify the further investment in cybersecurity that they would need to make in those controls.
That's a very valuable perspective, showing how strategic planning can address financial hurdles in cybersecurity. Thanks for tuning in into the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. We've been exploring cybersecurity insights with Kevin, including survey findings and online threats. Stay with us for strategies to boost cybersecurity for small businesses right after this break.
You dreamt big. You made the leap. You and your "we're not stopping at small" business. Doesn't matter you've never done it before. You unlock those problems. You adapt to change. You learn to evolve. You're pioneers in challenging times, finding your own frontiers. Wherever you e-commerce, UPS is with you. So nothing is going to hold you back.
4 billion people check their email every day. That's 4 billion missed opportunities if your message doesn't make it. To reach your customer's inbox, you need a winning strategy. And Constant Contact delivers. Literally, over 97% deliverability. Elevate your email game with easy-to-use templates, writing assistants powered by AI, and in-depth metrics. Ensuring your email is flawless, delivered, and read. Constant Contact delivers. Give it a try.
At IHG Hotels and Resorts, we're in the business of you.
We're here to help you plug in,
connect, and recharge.
make an impression,
and meet with confidence.
With 19 brands built for business,
your business gets even more rewarding.
with an award-winning loyalty program at 6,000 IHG hotels and resorts worldwide.
Welcome back to the podcast. Before the break, we covered key cyber threats and survey insights with Kevin. Now let's dive into practical steps small businesses can take to boost their cybersecurity. But Kevin, could you please share a real-life example of how your firm has helped organizations overcome these cybersecurity challenges?
Yeah, and I can do it like time and time again. We see examples, like I mentioned, that we get brought in during a breach. And so again, the first part is remediating, helping that customer get through that breach. Post that, with many of our customers, we either do one of two things, and we've seen it in the industry where we help them deploy new tools. We help them kind of create better effectiveness for the tools they have. Oftentimes, they're not being used in the best way or effective, and or not being monitored.
Right.
And then give the customer and help build the customer a roadmap to where they are. Again, many customers of all sizes look to have us do that for them, and kind of in a simple outcome-based way. Instead of them investing in the technology and the people in the process and all that, we become that for them. The similar way that today you outsource your banking to the banks and other things to other industries, we can do that. It's all we do. It's our business. It's what we do 7/24. So we're not distracted by other activities that these businesses might run and cause them not to have this as what all they do.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, real world examples, they do, bring these strategies to life and help us understand a bit more better. Next, we'll explore how ISA cybersecurity really stays current with the evolving trends. In cybersecurity, I mean, staying informed is key, as we've discussed, as technology and cyber threats, they rapidly change. But Kevin, how does your team at ISA Cybersecurity stay updated with the latest cybersecurity trends and technologies?
Well, that's a great question. And I will start by saying, similar to the question before, this is all we do. So it's an incumbent on us to always stay up to date.
Right.
We subscribe to many different threat feeds, threat sources. We work with the governments at all levels to make sure that we're understanding of what they're seeing and what they're doing. We also have a immense amount of data that's coming into our organization from clients of all sizes and all different industries. So we get information that way. We stay on top of it that way. Above and beyond that, though, we have obviously trained, certified people. And so we make sure that they're always current in their certifications. Oftentimes, they are out attending events where they're learning from other professionals. Oftentimes, they're at events providing their knowledge and doing training and providing speaking spots to talk about what we're seeing. And so those are a couple of the areas that we do. We're no different than I'll say we practice what we preach.
Right.
So we live within a framework ourselves. Our people are constantly tested in terms of security awareness and training and testing. And our organization tests against our controls, and we hire third parties to test. So often organizations get attestations, things like SOC 2 or NIST certification, that is a testing against your organization and testing against controls. So these are some of the ways that we kind of stay up to date and up to speed. And candidly, to the earlier question about creating trust, when you have external parties come in and test your controls and the notion of one of these audits or one of these certifications, and you tell your clients about it, that's a great way to build trust. That's a great way to extend the trust that you're making an investment. And it's another form of educating on the investments you're making.
No, it's impressive how staying informed can make such a difference in addressing cybersecurity challenges very effectively. Now, given the rise of AI, what role do you see AI playing in cybersecurity for the next few years?
That is a great question, and it comes up all the time. And I'd say right now, AI is a supportive technology. There's some terminology that's used in the industry, whether something is the technology plus AI or AI plus a technology.
Right.
And so I think of things, commercial technologies today that have built into their technology some capabilities around machine learning and AI and analysis of the data. And that's the technology plus AI side of it. And so we're seeing that adopted very quickly. And so organizations leveraging tools that have AI capabilities within them is fantastic. Individuals, customers and consumers and employees are leveraging AI to help them do their job as a kind of sidekick and help them stay secure. And even in our world and in the work that we do in the banks and many of the large enterprises, they're implementing AI in that way as well. They're also implementing it in the analysis of the events and all the data that they get to kind of weed through it very quickly.
Right.
Traditional security operations is around collecting events and having use cases and things mapped against those events. When two things look like each other, then that triggers an event. Machine learning, or AI in this case, allows you to do that on a much faster speed and allows the AI to look at different aspects of the event, not just the two that you've defined. So we're starting to do that. That's where you get into building out specific agents that do portions of jobs that are very tedious and time consuming for an individual to do, but they can do very quickly to consolidate the information, to react quicker, to give security analysts and security engineers information faster to know, do I react or do I not react? Today, there I think in the future, you're going to see things more autonomous SOC operations.
Right.
That's certainly where we're headed in our organization. And that doesn't mean that people aren't part of security. It just means those activities that were previously done in the early stages of the security stack and the early stages of security analysis are now being done by the AI agents to collect and augment and support the individuals that are making decisions.
Right.
Today, AI is great in certain analysis and things, but ultimately, organizations are still not assigning the accountability to AI. And if you think of the Raytheon accountability matrix, you have the person that's accountable for the end result or the technology, whatever that's accountable, and then you have the people that are responsible for doing. And so the responsibilities are being done by AI in some cases, but the accountability still has to be an individual taking that accountability and taking that ownership of I made a decision, and this is the decision I made to protect the organization.
No, thank you so much, Kevin, for that forward-looking approach and perspective. But before we close and let you go, what is one essential piece of advice that you would give to our small business owners listening in Canada as they think about strengthening their cybersecurity posture?
So I would say if they have not already done it, do an assessment against the controls you have today. Have an independent third party do that assessment. I say organizations like us, ISA, or others can do that. But do that assessment so you know where it is outside of the people that are doing that work for you. Because they may not know what they don't know. And They may believe they're doing all the best things for the organization. But it's very good to get an external perspective, especially an external perspective from an organization that's seen other organizations, that has a broader view, an organization that this is all that they do and they know what good looks like. And so I'd say, if possible, do that. That entitles doing the basics, the basics. A lot of organizations today, especially in the small business community, struggle with buying things like cyber insurance because cyber insurance has certain bars you have to meet. And those bars are candidly some of the basics. Things like multi-factor authentication on all your accounts is a massive control that can help mitigate against threats and breaches and those sorts of things. Security awareness training. People often look down or downplay the importance of security training. And it's more than just a checkbox to say, hey, I ran people through a video once a year.
Right.
It's that kind of knowledge training, testing those who fail the testing or struggle, training again, kind of doing that activity. A lot of things, people don't all learn the same way. And yet a lot of security awareness training is delivered in a manner that you believe everyone learns the same way. It's videos. Often some people learn tactily. They have to be part of it. They have to feel it as opposed to a video. They have to be part of a simulation. And so you have to use different methods, not just a tool that sends some videos once a year and you check box and say, hey, I did security awareness training. You have to test. So these are some important areas. And if possible, again, out-task security operations.
Right.
Have somebody else looking at it so that you can focus on what you do best as your business, and have those organizations that are going to look at this for you 7/24, 365 in a comprehensive fashion. That's all they do.
That's amazing. No, thank you so much, Kevin, for sharing these great insights. It's been fascinating and very interesting to have you cover all these great topics that we did today. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much for your time.
In today's episode, we had the pleasure of speaking with Kevin Dawson, the president and CEO of ISA Cybersecurity. We covered crucial topics from survey insights and cybersecurity concerns to practical cybersecurity strategies for businesses. We'd like to extend our thanks to our partners, RBC, UPS, Constant Contact, IAG, and Google for their support in this podcast. Please don't forget to visit our website, CanadianSME.ca, and subscribe to the magazine for more insightful content. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.